Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fractional Futures, where in this season we're exploring how fractional CMOs can help SMEs and portfolio companies accelerate growth and maximize enterprise value. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of data-driven decision-making in marketing. Gone are the days when marketing relied on gut instinct and creative intuition. I think in today's digital world, data is the key to understanding customers, optimizing campaigns, and proving ROI. Joining me today is Rob Nicholls, a strategic CFO, a non-executive director and board advisor with over 35 years of global finance experience. Rob specialises in profit maximisation and value creation, and today he'll be sharing his insights on why marketing must move beyond vanity metrics and why predictive analytics is essential for long-term success. Hi Rob, how are you?
See you again, Paul. Yeah, very well, very well.
The first topic, Rob, that I'd like to talk about is the role of analytics in modern marketing. Now, I know you're a CFO and you've probably worked with many marketers that have come to you and they've probably shown you some form of analytics that you've had to make a decision on whether you give them more or less budget. So I think marketing, certainly in the last 15, 20 years, it's evolved from an art into a science where data is driving pretty much every decision. From a marketing point of view, a marketer can see the analytics, they can look at trends, they can look at patterns. But I think marketers are also slightly guilty of maybe presenting the wrong data and not the data that really resonates with a CFO or an investor. So Rob, how do you see the role of data evolving in marketing? And what expectations do you have for marketing teams when it comes to data decision making?
So I think there's almost too much data and information available at the moment. And I think a lot of it has been generated and retained within silos traditionally, and finance own many of those silos. So again, it comes down to, I think, relationships to a large extent. Does the CFO or the lead finance person trust and believe in other people in the organization that they're willing to share that data with? Basically, today, the CFO owns the numbers, and whether those are sales numbers, financial data, marketing data, effectively, it does generally roll up to the CFO. The CRM system will often report into the marketing lead, but effectively, the investment in that technology, the oversight, and I have access to the CRM systems in all my clients, and I will go in there and look at reports in the CRM system. So it's about making data and information available. Traditionally, it hasn't been available, and the right information, as you rightly said, is what is being presented to the board, what is being shared with the board, what do they value, what does the CEO and the CFO talk to with the board, what sort of, in this case, marketing numbers are being shared. And I think you're right, there is a movement away from what you might term as fluff KPIs, if you will, about eyeballs and followers and downloads effectively, to real tangible financial metrics, whether that's revenue based, whether that's pricing, whether that's customer acquisition cost, revenue per employee, revenue per customer, driving ARPU. There has to be sharing. There has to be a level of trust and engagement between the lead finance person, the CFO, and other members of the organization. Traditionally, as a CFO, I've worked very closely with the sales organization because that's where all the data generally comes from. It comes out of the sales system effectively. Now, whether that's an SAP, a Sage system, a Xero system, the custodian of that generally isn't the sales director. They may take reporting out of it, but the ownership of it generally resides under the CFO. And so, sharing of data, sharing of information, sharing of the right data, clearly very, very important. And marketers are probably getting on board with this now, understanding that they need to talk in the language of the CFO or the CEO. They're talking about a certain narrative in numbers, if you will, with investors, with the board, and marketing have to be up to speed with what that is. They're not sharing follower count or downloads. They're talking about revenue growth, customers acquisition costs, retention, conversion rates. Those are the sort of metrics that the board and the senior leadership of the organization are most interested in. I want to see what our monthly and quarterly sales conversion rate is. I want to look at what our retention rates are. I want to look at average revenue per customer, average revenue, per product or per location. I want to look at the profitability of, if we've got 6 locations, I want to look at the profitability of each one of those locations. I'm not really interested in eyeballs or downloads or likes because they're not going to drive decisions. You have to focus, at least in my world, on data and information that drives decisions. And if a piece of data isn't driving a decision, whether to spend, not to spend, whether to do more of something or less of something, if you're not talking about a metric that drives the decision, it's largely irrelevant to the conversation that we could be having or should be having. So you need to get on board with those metrics which really drive decision making. And those are generally metrics around client numbers, conversions, retention, sales, revenue, traction, margins, profitability.
You touched on that, some CFOs, they're slightly guarded of sharing their information. And that's good to hear, because it's not just my observation, because I've experienced that as well. I've as an in-house marketer and also working with clients, sometimes it's very, very difficult to get that revenue data from the CFO. And in terms of breaking down the silos between marketing, the marketing leader and the CFO, it's basically trust, isn't it? It's trust and credibility between those two protagonists, presumably. And if you've got that trust and credibility, that data will be better shared.
I think it's about relationships. I think it's about understanding and working together. I mean, for example, one of the marketing managers I used to have, I used to go with her to visit the agency that we were using, PR agency. We would go and visit clients together. So I, as the CFO, would be with the marketing person. So it was often a team approach. There would be 3 of us, the CEO, the managing director of the business unit, myself, and the marketing director. That was the team that went to see clients. So I would be in on the conversations that they were having about product, about placement, about services, about pricing, about distributors, about channels, and I would contribute to that conversation. And I think if you're involving the CFO or the lead finance person in those discussions, I think that creates a level of trust and validation, and that you're building a relationship. If you're having those meetings on your own and trying to retain data yourself, that's probably not going to engender the right sort of relationship that you need. And it has to be reciprocal both ways. If you're holding on to your marketing data and I'm going to hold on to my finance data, my revenue data, it's about sharing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's about trust, as you rightly say.
Absolutely. And it's nice that you mentioned about involving the CFO in various marketing activities. I've recently started working with a client, and there's been a marketing reset across the organization. And one of the things I'm doing with their CFO is involving them in the actual campaign building process, saying, these are the campaigns, that marketing can build. What numbers, what metrics are you expecting out of this campaign that we can measure? And he's been very open and honest about what his expectations are. And he started sharing information about revenue and where there's potential black holes in the future and where it's good at the moment. And having that visibility really does help the marketing leader or the marketing team understand that bigger picture. And so when we're building campaigns, we're not building campaigns just for the sake of building a campaign. There is a real commercial need behind it.
I think there's an interesting one around the timeline to a lot of these things. The expectation that marketing or the CEO may have is that you're going to flick a switch and you're going to get results. I think with the finance person, you're going to find that the timeline is often longer. It's next quarter. It's the second half of this year. It's maybe next year. And that's where it goes to investment in the brand and the relationships, is that we're not looking for a spike in client retention next month or a spike in client conversions next quarter kind of thing. There is an understanding of these things take time. And that comes from, again, building a relationship and establishing trust and understanding, and the CFO works on a longer term basis. I'm going to look at trends. I'm going to look at this first quarter in 2025, compare it to this first quarter in 2024. So I work on a longer timeline than perhaps the marketing perspective might look at. They might look at a 30, 60, 90-day timeline or a funnel that works over that period. I'm going to be looking at a longer timeline as well. So I think time is continuum you need to be cognizant of as well.
Yeah, and that probably is a good point to jump into the next topic. And I know you mentioned in that last piece there a few of the marketing metrics that you expect as a CFO to be tracked and which resonate most with you. And I know, Rob, you know that not all marketing metrics are created equal. Yes, there's lots of vanity metrics out there, impressions, eyeballs on your content, stuff like that, which is great for telling a story around, is our content strategy generating enough awareness? Are we getting more eyes on our content? But eyes on content doesn't mean or necessarily convert into new clients and pound signs on the bottom line. So I want to break down the metrics that really matter the most to the board, to investors, to the CFO, and how marketing can use them to prove their impact. Because I think marketing is in a place right now where marketing leaders are having to prove their value. And I think getting the right focus on the right metrics is probably a good way to overcoming that. So Rob, with your CFO perspective, what marketing metrics do you consider the most important when evaluating the effectiveness of marketing spend? And how should marketing leaders present those insights, that information to the finance team?
I think you almost need to reverse engineer some of this. What is the discussion? What is the board pack look like? What is the CEO presenting to the board or discussing with other directors? What is the CFO presenting to the management team or the board, and certainly to any non-execs, any external investors, and kind of reverse engineer that back, because they're not sharing followers or eyeballs. They are most definitely sharing pricing data, customer data, customer retention data, conversion rates. So I think a good starting point is to reverse engineer what is being presented in a place where decisions are being made. And that's generally the C-suite or the board. Maybe that board might be a couple of external directors. It might be 2, 3 external directors. What is being presented there, and reverse engineer that back to what is required, because it really is not eyeballs, blogs, followers, likes, and so forth. It's not those metrics. And I think to my mind, one of the things I focus on intensely is margins, is gross margin. What dollars have I got left after I strip away the cost of delivering that revenue? 100 is revenue, strip away costs of 70 to deliver that revenue. My gross margin is 30. That's the number that I'm really, really focused on, because that's the number that's going to drive value in the business. And that's the number that an awful lot of decisions are going to be made on. Are our margins expanding? Are they stable? And if they're contracting, what are we doing to arrest that compression of margin? Is it our clients are turning over? Are we not retaining our clients? Is our pricing weak? Is our market positioning weak? What numbers are we presenting? And that might be, it depends on the industry. It depends on the type of business. If you're a hotel business, you're looking at occupancy. You're looking at revenue per room or revenue per key. And that might be the case for a hospitality. It's like, how many tables are we serving? What is the average ticket per table? And those are the sort of numbers you've got to be cognizant of. And there has to be, in the board's view and the CEO and the CFO's view, there has to be growth in those numbers. No, stable isn't really going to cut it today. Equally, I'm a big believer in pricing as well. Taking pricing. Pricing determines where the business is going to be 6 to 9 months' time, if you will. If you're taking pricing, expanding margins, and your revenues are maintaining alignment, your business is going to be scaling and growing. So pricing is a big part of it as well. I would encourage marketers to look at pricing very intently, look at customer retention intently, look at customer conversions intensely. Those are the sort of numbers that are going to drive decisions, which the marketing lead may or may not be party to. They might well be party to, but you have to try to drive the decision that you want. So if you say to me that we can take pricing on product A, B, and C, but we should retain pricing as it is for product D, I will likely listen to that conversation if I can see that revenue generation is going to come from that, margin expansion potentially going to come from that. There's going to be profitability out of that as well. And maybe we need to recognize that maybe our product portfolio perhaps is too wide. I work with a client at the moment, they've got something like 4,000 products in the portfolio. It's way too many. They probably only turn over a couple of hundred of those. So we can prune back and maybe outsource the delivery of those other products and focus in on those maybe 300 to 500 products that really drive 80 to 90% of the revenue. So I would focus in on those sort of metrics is, where are we getting our revenue from? Is it the 80-20? 20% of our portfolio or our clients are likely driving 60 to 80% of the revenue and the margin. So looking tensely at client numbers, product portfolio. I'm a big believer in trimming down portfolios. If a business isn't making money, get out of it. And the C-suite, the board, is about capital allocation. I think we've talked about this before. Is I'm not going to allocate more capital to a business that is barely breaking even unless I can see the long term that there's the growth trajectory. The business is going to turn over 3 or 4 times what it is doing today. That's fine, but you need to have that on the table. You need to have visibility of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think certainly a lot of the KPIs that I've presented across my career, it's all about customer acquisition cost. How much does it cost the business to get new customers versus retain? Customer lifetime value, how much money are we earning per customer and how long are we retaining them for? There's an interesting metric as well. I don't know if you use this one often. If you use this one, Rob, is the LTV to CAC ratio. So lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. So a 3-to-1 ratio generally indicates a strong level of profitability. Is that a percentage or ratio that you work for? Or would you expect something higher than that?
It's not a ratio that I see very often, to be honest. I'm cognizant of it, and I have seen it in once or twice, but it's not a metric. I think more businesses should look at those sort of metrics. The lifetime value of a client. If you're only retaining a client a year, and it's costing you, £3,000 or £4,000 per client to onboard them, to bring them up to speed, that's not a long-term value creating opportunity. But if you're keeping clients 2, 3, 5 years, you're taking pricing during that time as well, and the onboarding cost of that client is relatively affordable, i.e. you've got good systems and good processes in place, and that you can onboard someone quickly, diligently, and showcase the value you can create. And if you can retain that client for a long period of time, I think you should be looking at sort of 6 to 8 to 1 rather than 3 to 1. That's going to create a long-term value in the business. It's all about value creation through revenue, margins, and profitability. I think we sometimes undersell what the opportunity is. I'm a big believer in having much bigger goals. If a business can grow 3 to 5% over the last couple of years, you can certainly grow 10 to 15%. More likely, if we do things differently, 20 to 30%. And those are the businesses that I want to work with. With all due respect, I don't want to work with a business that's growing low single digits. I want to be growing a business 20, 30, 40, 50%. And you can. If you get it right, if you get your marketing right, get your pricing right, get your product market fit right, you can absolutely grow. And I think we have a tendency to downplay the opportunity sometimes, which is unfortunate. That's the British part of us.
Rob, how do you go about benchmarking the performance of a business against the competitors out there? Because it's quite hard to get that industry data, isn't it? What is the approach? Is that the role of the CMO? Is that the role of the CFO? Is it a bit of a joint venture between those two protagonists?
I think you're right. The data historically has been difficult, and because it's difficult, a lot of people didn't do it. And I think your point is well taken. It should be, several people in the organization. I, as a CFO, should not just go out there and try to scrape data from various other companies. I can look at anyone who's a public company and look at their data very easily. It's not easy to find data for smaller business, under £100 million turnover business. That is really difficult. Now, at the same time, we have AI today that can scrape data that you probably wouldn't have been aware of that even exists. So it is relatively easy for you as a marketing manager, or for me as a CFO, to go out there and say, tell me 5 low-cost ETF index funds with a cost of less than 10 basis points. Within seconds, I've got the answer, and then I can go out and do my research on that. So you can relatively easily, in the last 2 years certainly, you can get that data that's readily accessible. You're actually right. I worked a lot with hotel companies in the US, and it's relatively simple to scrape data from the top 10 hotel companies that look at ARPU, occupancy, cost per key. That data is readily accessible, and you should be able to extrapolate that into your business, because if you're running a hotel in Truro, you need to know what sort of rates other people are charging, and it's readily accessible today. It's readily accessible, and if you're not doing it, you're falling short. I think it's a partnership. I will do it as a CFO, and you should do it as a CMO.
And you mentioned AI there, and it's probably a nice segue into the final topic, where we want to look at how you can leverage predictive analytics, whether that's through financial modeling or AI or whatever tool you might have. So predictive analytics, AI, is changing the game. It's allowing businesses to anticipate customer needs and stay ahead of market trends. To maximize its impact, marketing and finance, they do need to align on shared data insights. And again, it's important that two protagonists, CMO, CFO, they share data. They don't hold it in silos. So how can the finance and marketing teams collaborate to leverage predictive analytics in the business planning process? And what role does financial modeling play in validating marketing forecasts?
Again, I think it comes down to relationships. There's an awful lot of data, whether it's in proprietary systems or cloud-based providers. I think there's a huge amount of data in the CRM system that marketing will often own, that finance would love to get their hands on a lot of that data as well. And I, as the CFO for a number of companies, will play around in the pipeline of opportunities, because I want visibility of what deals are in the pipeline, what pricing is being discussed, and if I wasn't party to that pricing, then I can circle back to either the sales or business development or the marketing person to say, we need to be cognizant. One firm I work with in the build environment, we put through a number of price increases because we were basically underselling ourselves in the market. And that data, I got that data from the CRM system because I saw the bid prices that were going out to clients and kind of recognized fairly quickly that those bid prices were likely largely the same as they were 2 or 3 years ago. So there has to be sharing of data. And I do think there are a couple of positives here. Whether, in a finance world, you're working with a Sage or a Xero or QuickBooks, like it or not. Xero is very easy to get data out of as well, and to put it into a PDF, upload that PDF to an AI agent, and you can get data out of that within seconds. Same goes for the CRM. I mean, you can take export files out of CRMs, put it into AI, and glean all sorts of data that you probably couldn't glean from the CRM system. I use HubSpot a lot, and their reporting isn't very good. It's not very intuitive. It's very costly as well. So you might be using a lower cost, maybe even a freemium version of Pipedrive or Salesforce or HubSpot. If you export those files, whether it's a CSV file, into an AI agent, you'll often glean more information quicker, of more value, than you could out of the reporting systems out of Xero or HubSpot sometimes. So it's kind of an irony that some of these systems, these proprietary systems like Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, are actually being undermined by the value that you can extract through AI. I mean, they're all adopting AI tools within their functionality. I use AI a lot on zero reporting to look at trends, to pull out data, and that's very insightful. And that's still in its early stages with a lot of companies, and I suspect an awful lot of businesses aren't using AI to spot trends. Again, I come down to pricing is a huge lever for me because it's a tangible number that I can look at. What are other people pricing? There's so much data out there, and a lot of it comes to trust and the relationship you've got between those functional groups. And we're breaking down silos between sales, business development, marketing, and finance, which is just good, but there's still a long way to go as well.
And I guess in terms of the roles, me as a marketer, when I was doing my marketing degree, I did a very small piece on finance as part of my electives. And I'm certainly by no stretch of the imagination very good at creating financial models. I'd probably expect the CFO would be the right person to go to say, can you help build a financial model?
Well.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to outsource it to the financial modeler. That's likely what I'm going to do because it's quicker, faster, cheaper than me spending 3 days trying to model something that I can get done in a few hours outsourcing for a couple of $100.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's probably a good point to close the show. If you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you found value from our discussion. In the next episode, Rob joins me again, and we'll be discussing how brand equity can be transformed into enterprise value. So stay tuned for that one. Rob, thank you again for giving up your time today to do this episode. And thank you for sharing your perspectives. I really enjoyed the show and listening to your insights, and I very much look forward to the next episode.
Good stuff. Appreciate it, Paul.